Imagine walking outside on a sunny afternoon, bending down, and picking up a simple, smooth gray stone. You hold it in your hand, feeling its weight, and you ask it a daring question. How old are you? It is a scientific mystery that feels almost impossible to solve. You cannot just look at a tree trunk and count its wooden rings. You cannot ask the earth for its birth certificate. For a very long time, this was the ultimate puzzle for humanity. We live on a giant, spinning ball of dirt and water, but nobody knew when the story actually started. Finding the real age of our planet would become a wild detective story. It is an epic tale spanning many lifetimes, filled with brilliant minds, huge mistakes, and one glowing secret hidden deep inside the dirt. Long ago, people looked for answers in old books. They counted the grandfathers and great-grandfathers listed in ancient, dusty writings. By adding up those human lifetimes, they guessed the Earth was only about 6,000 years old. It made perfect sense to them at the time. 6,000 years felt like a very long time to a human being. A whole kingdom could rise, build grand cities, and fall into ruin in just a few centuries. So, they believed the world was born not too long before the Great Pyramids of Egypt were built. That was the previous rule, the accepted truth that everyone believed without question. But the rocks were quietly telling a different story. A few curious souls began to walk through deep rocky valleys and look up at towering mountain peaks. They noticed how a tiny stream of water could slowly carve a massive canyon out of solid stone. They watched the wind scrape away hard rock, grain by tiny grain. If the world was only 6,000 years old, how could slow drops of water carve a canyon a whole mile deep? The math simply did not add up. The Earth had to be much, much older. It needed millions of years to build mountains and then wash them all away into the sea. The old ideas crumbled. A new, dizzying thought took hold of the world. What if the Earth was ancient? This idea of deep time was thrilling, but it created a massive problem. How could anyone prove it? You cannot put a giant canyon on a scale. You cannot measure a mountain with a pocket stopwatch. The rock experts knew the Earth was old, but they had no way to count the years. They needed a clock. But no human clock could tick for millions of years. They were stuck in the dark, guessing at the shadows of the past. Enter a man who wanted to solve the mystery using pure math. His name was Lord Kelvin. He was one of the smartest scientists in the entire world. He understood heat, energy, and how hot things cool down. He looked at the planet and saw a giant math problem waiting to be solved. He knew that deep underground, the Earth was boiling hot. Erupting volcanoes proved that the inside was filled with melted, fiery rock. So he made a very clever guess. He decided the Earth started its life as a giant, glowing ball of hot liquid lava floating in freezing space. Lord Kelvin asked a brilliant question. If you take a giant ball of melted rock and let it sit in the freezing cold of space, how long does it take to cool down? Think of a hot potato taken fresh out of the oven. It is too hot to touch at first, but if you set it on the counter and wait, it slowly cools off. He used his giant brain to calculate the cooling time of a planet-sized potato. He crunched the heavy numbers. He checked his messy chalkboard work. His conclusion was shocking. He announced that the Earth was between 20 million and 40 million years old. That sounds like a lot of time to you and me, but to the rock experts, it was a total disaster. The rock experts panicked. 20 million years was not nearly enough time to carve the Grand Canyons or push up the highest mountain peaks. Even worse, the famous biologist Charles Darwin was worried sick. His new ideas about animals slowly changing over time needed hundreds of millions of years to work. Lord Kelvin had trapped them. His math seemed perfect, but it squeezed the timeline far too tight. A dark cloud hung over science. The smartest man alive had spoken, and his numbers were terrifyingly small. No one could find a single flaw in his math. He was the master of heat, and his rules were ironclad. If a hot ball cools down, it loses its heat at a steady, predictable speed. There was no way around it. The timeline of the world was stuck in a cage. The great minds of the day argued, but they could not beat the numbers. The true age of the planet remained locked away in a vault of bad math. The scientific community pondered. The gears of understanding turned slowly. Decades passed. Then, a completely unexpected spark lit up the dark. It did not come from a grand mountain or a fiery volcano. It came from a tiny, glowing rock in a quiet laboratory. Scientists discovered something that felt like pure magic. They found a hidden power hiding inside certain types of heavy dirt. They called this invisible buzzing energy radioactivity. Radioactivity was a game changer. It means that some tiny pieces of dirt are unstable. They are like tiny packed spring toys ready to pop. When they pop, they shoot out invisible pieces of themselves. And when they do this, they make something very important. They make heat. This was the missing puzzle piece. This was the secret fire hiding inside the Earth. The planet was not just a hot potato slowly cooling down. It had a secret heater inside it, running all the time. Lord Kelvin was wrong. He was completely wrong, and it was a wonderful thing. He did not know about the secret atomic heaters because no one knew about them yet. The radioactive rocks deep underground were constantly making fresh heat. That is why the planet was still warm inside. It had not been cooling down from a single hot start. The discovery of radioactivity managed to overturn everything. It smashed the old timeline to pieces. The Earth was free to be ancient once again. But the story does not end there. Knowing the Earth is older than 20 million years is not the same as knowing its exact birthday. The great minds needed a real number. A brilliant scientist named Ernest Rutherford looked at these popping, heating atoms and saw something else. He saw a rhythm. He noticed that these unstable atoms pop and change at a very steady speed. They never speed up. They never slow down. They follow a perfect, unbreakable rule. Imagine an hourglass filled with glowing green sand. The sand falls from the top glass to the bottom glass at a perfect, steady pace. Rutherford realized that radioactive atoms act exactly like that falling sand. Over a long, long time, a radioactive rock slowly turns into a completely different kind of rock. For example, unstable uranium slowly turns into boring, stable lead. If you look at a rock and count how much uranium is left and how much lead has appeared, you can tell exactly how long that rock has been sitting there. This was the ultimate breakthrough. Science had finally found its clock. It was not a clock with metal hands or clicking gears. It was a clock made of atoms, ticking silently inside the stones. This brilliant method is called radiometric dating. It was the golden key to unlocking deep time. All the scientists had to do was find a very old rock, put it under their new machines, and read the atomic clock. They started testing rocks from all over the world with huge smiles on their faces. But there was one more tricky problem waiting for them. The Earth is a very active, messy place. Hot volcanoes melt old rocks. Heavy rain washes them away. Giant earthquakes crush them into dust. The surface of our world is always recycling itself. Finding a rock that has been sitting undisturbed since the very beginning of the world is almost impossible. The original rocks from the Earth's baby days were gone, melted down, and turned into something else. How do you read a clock if the clock has been melted in a fire? The detectives of science had to look up. They had to look past the clouds and into the dark, starry night sky. If the Earth's original surface was ruined, they needed rocks from space. They needed rocks that were born at the exact same time as our planet, but had never been melted by volcanoes. They needed meteorites. These space rocks are leftover building blocks from the very creation of our solar system. Sometimes they fall from the sky and land quietly in the dirt. A determined scientist named Claire Patterson got his hands on a special meteorite. It had crashed into a giant crater a long time ago. It was a pristine, untouched piece of the early solar system. He took it to a super clean room. He wore special suits to make sure no modern dust could touch it. He used the atomic hourglass method. He carefully counted the uranium. He counted the lead. He held his breath as the final numbers came together on his paper. The rock clock ticked its final answer. The numbers locked into place. The answer was not 6,000 years. It was not 20 million years. The true age of the Earth was 4.5 billion years. Let that massive, beautiful number sink in. 4.5 billion years old. It is a number so huge, it makes your head spin. If 1 year was a single step, walking 4.5 billion steps would take you around the entire globe dozens of times. It was a moment of pure triumph for humanity. The great mystery was finally solved. We are a species that only lives for a few short decades, yet we had reached back across the darkness of space and time to touch the very beginning of our home. We found our planet's birthday. This single discovery changed how we see ourselves forever. We are living on an ancient, wandering spaceship. The impact of this giant number rippled through every corner of human thought. The rock experts cheered in the streets. They finally had the endless time they needed to explain the giant canyons and the towering mountains. The slow drops of water had billions of years to do their carving. The mountains had billions of years to rise and fall. The planet made sense again. The silent stones were vindicated. Charles Darwin's ghost could finally rest in peace. The tree of life had more than enough time to grow its many branches. Tiny, single cells had billions of years to slowly change, adapt, and turn into fish, dinosaurs, birds, and eventually us. Deep time was the magic ingredient that made the incredible diversity of life possible. Without those 4.5 billion years, our existence would be impossible to explain. We are just a tiny chapter at the very end of a massive, epic book. For most of the Earth's life, there were no humans to ask questions. There were only bubbling oceans, shifting continents, and silent skies. We arrived at the very last second of this vast cosmic year. Yet, with nothing but our curious minds, we figured out the story of the time before us. The journey to find the real age of our world is showing the incredible power of asking daring questions. It proves that it is okay to be wrong, just like the smartest men of the past were wrong. Every mistake is just a stepping stone to a greater truth. We kept looking, we kept testing, and we kept wondering. The next time you pick up a simple stone, look at it closely. You are not just holding a piece of dirt. You are holding a frozen clock, a silent witness to billions of years of history. You are holding a piece of a 4.5 billion-year-old miracle. And the most beautiful part of all is that we finally know its story.